All right, Mr. Facilitator. I got my notebook out and ready to go.
Oh, that's me. All right.
You did propose it, right, Gregor?
I did. Yes, I did. I'm just teasing. It's been a hectic day, so I'm switching gears here from work into fun. So, um,
Oh, I know how that is. But it's just us, two
yeah,
other guys who care as much as you do. So, don't
yeah,
kill yourself.
yeah. I didn't have a whole lot of structure for this. There's been a few things I've been batting around. I finally open sourced Indie Book Club, and I have a handful of requests in there for some changes, which are some are pretty easy, like post visibility, so people can make a private post. I think David made a request to use. I don't know if it's WorldCat, but I don't think it's some other like open source library of book covers, basically, that you can just embed images. And then most recently at Austin, during one of the sessions, we were talking about like Own Your Swarm and some other stuff, like the basics of micropub. And it got me thinking about maybe like an Own Your Reads thing, or like a micropub client that would do paste ups, take your Goodreads post and automatically syndicate it back to your site, because the user interface of Goodreads is still obviously a lot better than anything we have so far.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I haven't really thought about that much since Austin, but I don't know if it would be a separate tool or it could be part of Indie Book Club. Yeah. So I don't know. That's kind of where I've been thinking of reposts. What have you guys been thinking and or doing on your own site with read posts?
I've been kind of biding my time waiting because I use a Kindle, so they all collect on Goodreads, but they don't make it out of there yet.
Yeah, I think I still have it set up. I've got Goodreads, an RSS feed to if this then that to catch stuff on my back end, some of which I may tweak and publish eventually, but a lot of it I'm just catching just to catch the data more than anything else.
What data is in that feed?
Most of it is book titles, authors. They do thumbnails, but the thumbnail that they send you is super tiny. I mean, it's a true thumbnail. It's not anything like big enough you can do something useful and resize and make pretty. And then it's also still pointing back at their server anyway. I'm trying to think of what else. Usually they get, obviously they give you a date and a time, and which I use probably more than anything else. I use it for the date and time stamp of when the thing hit. And I was thinking, I looked for it, I don't know, a month ago, and I think it's down, but I remember there being a service called silo.pub.
Yes.
Ages ago, and I was down, and it looked like somebody had quit maintaining it.
Yeah, that was Kyle Mahan.
Yeah. And I figured that's what.
And yeah, he's still around. He just doesn't come to a lot of events.
Yeah.
Yeah,
too busy at Medium.
I think Aaron Parecki actually runs a copy of it himself for one of the services. I forget which one.
Is it a public copy? Because I seem to remember that having some kind of Goodreads dovetail. And I always meant to go back and tweak around with it to see exactly which part of Goodreads it supported or didn't.
Yeah, it does do Goodreads. So SiloPub is a micropub client to post to the Silo. So I don't know if it does. I don't think it does anything the other way around. So if you wanted to like post, I guess what you could do is post a review in the micropub client that would send it to like your own site, but then also to Goodreads.
So it was more for syndicating to Goodreads rather than pulling data out of Goodreads. Okay, and that's kind of what I thought too, because it seems more beneficial to have a micropub client that can publish to your own site, and then to have some secondary method of syndicating out from your site to the third party. So you can do that rather than doing some kind of Pesos related thing.
Yeah, honestly, I need to dig into that some more because I hadn't thought about that. Like, I guess a micropub client could, like, it could syndicate to multiple targets, you know, like your own site and then also a silo.
Yeah. And David Chansky's built some reasonable stuff in WordPress for usually syndicating out using web mention more than anything else, I think. So he's got some reasonable support for IndieWeb News and IndieWeb XYZ. And then he's using Bridgie to do a piece of it as well. But it's been ages since I've even tried to look at Goodreads' API for syndicating something out that way. So, and maybe the easiest way would be to build into Bridgie the ability to syndicate and use the API that way. Or at least building it that way would make it more accessible, I think, to way more people than not.
Sure. Yeah. Doug, you were saying you use Kindle, and that pushes to Goodreads. Does it push like what, like your notes or comments or?
Yeah, and progress. And when completed. Some of the time, there's actually a lot that are like currently reading is huge because it doesn't always catch that I finished it. But it does progress for you, or do you have to do it explicitly? Let's see.
Because the only thing I've noticed is typically Goodreads, it will, or that I've noticed, it only does it when you finish a book and you get to the last page and it says, essentially give it a star rating, and then you can write a quick review, and it'll syndicate that to Goodreads on your behalf. And it will also...
yeah, I think you're right. There's no progress.
And it'll kind of mark it as the book is being finished read in your feed, which is good. But it doesn't do the individual, like I read 20 pages today and stopped to do that. But the other thing it'll also do automatically is when you highlight, that dog's going to kill me or I'm going to kill it. Give me 1 second and I'll get her to shut up.
Yeah, so I wonder, as I'm thinking about a Pesos thing, so like you're saying, like your currently reading list is kind of a mess. Like I wonder if that's something that you really would want like automatically turned on if the data is not correct. Like would it be automatically sending posts back to your site, or would it be selectively?
Well, it gets. At one point, I was currently reading them. I guess. Yeah, if I read one page of a book and decide to abandon it, then it would still be in here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Hello, Christoph. I didn't see you come in. Do you have anything you wanted to share about repost doing, or you're if they can hear us /r.
Maybe he'll pop up. So the other thing I've noticed that Goodreads does reasonably well and is integrated, but you have to go in and uncover it to be visible. And I don't know if they do an RSS feed for it too, because that would be an easy way to pull it in. But if you highlight or annotate pieces on a Kindle, they Goodreads will pick it up and store it as a private highlight or annotation, and then you have the option of making them public or not. And I have it on my list of things to check out to see if they've got some kind of RSS feed or some method to get that stuff out of the silo and back onto my site so that I can have all the notes and annotations automatically picked up and pulled over. And my guess is that's a recent thing that they've been dovetailing kind of functionality that used to be in Goodreads and functionality that Amazon had ages ago. And they've got it working on the website, but I don't know if they've got API access built in for that stuff or not. And if they do, and it's easily uncoverable, all the better. But I haven't looked to see if they have an RSS feed or API access to any of those highlights or annotations. I have to pull it up and check quickly. But it seems like every once a month, one or more people say, "Hey, I wish I could quit Goodreads."
Yeah. And I definitely see, I think, an increase in that once Amazon bought them too. Partially because I think, well, there's always a concern of, are they going to just shut them down? People don't like Amazon, etc. So. Checking out Silo Pub.
And it looks like, wow, get the books on a member's shelf. It has a notes field. I wonder if they have an API browser.
How much are people using Indie Book Club on micro.blog?
That's a good question.
Is are you getting heavy use? And I imagine from the server you can tell who or where people are coming from and what those numbers look like.
Excuse me. Yeah, well, I'm not running any analytics right now. I mean, I can do query in the database, basically tell you how many people are on microblog, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I presume things have been going pretty smoothly in that regard, because I haven't really heard any feedback from Manton or other microblog people. Although I do wonder how discoverable I am for it. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's on the About page. I link to my home page, I guess, but I don't have like a dedicated support form or anything. I need to, do I not have, yeah, I need to add the GitHub on here. I don't even have that.
Well, I would imagine most of the people are doing it through the Discover page with the book emoji more than anything else. Although if you want to be kind of more discoverable or put it out there, we should ping Gene McDonald and have you appear on Micro Monday sometime in the next, couple months. And then you can talk about it as a tool that exists for micro.blog.
Sure.
And if nothing else, that'll pick up a whole bunch of people who are paying attention and would care about it and potentially use it more frequently. Sadly, I'm not seeing any. I'm not seeing any feeds that take highlights or annotations.
At least not advertised ones. Maybe like
Yeah.
secret ones. Like those,
yeah, there
right?
may be secret ones, but I'm not seeing any direct ones. Yeah. I'm going to step away a second. I'll be right back.
All right. Pulling up like the issues for Indie Book Club. Visibility for private posts, editing existing posts, notes, comments field, that would definitely be helpful. Although that's also, I think, a breaking chain for microblog, so I definitely need to coordinate with Manton if I do that. Allow people to log in with, excuse me, with a subdirectory, not just the root domain. And then similar to the stuff we discussed as far as web mention, actually Ryan Barrett, Snarfed, suggested aggregating read posts that aren't made through the client, similar to like Indie News. You could basically send a web mention. That's a little different than I guess what we were talking about.
So send a bunch at once, or
What's that?
Send a bunch at once?
A bunch of what?
Of read posts at once? Was that the idea? Or
basically, it would be like an Indie News, but for read posts. So, like you could post them on your own site directly, and then you could send it to Indie News, and there'd be like, or not Indie News, I don't know, Indie Book Club, and there would be a feed of people's read posts there from other sites.
oh, okay.
Which is interesting, but I don't know. I think it's a little. I kind of like keeping it focused on micropub.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody wants to be a new silo, right?
It would be, well, it'd be easy because it'd just be linking out to people's existing posts. I wouldn't be too concerned about it, but I'm not sure. Like, I don't know. We don't have a huge number of people doing read posts. You know, like that's a cool discovery thing. If everyone is posting a lot of different read posts and we're aggregating them, you know, it would sort of be like IndieWeb.xyz, but for read posts.
Yeah. Well, or if you did it that way, you could differentiate it maybe by genre or broad genre: fiction, nonfiction, sci-fi, fantasy, and then things become discoverable that way. But although you've already got all the data, because you save all that stuff on your end, so that if people want to export it off in the future, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, I don't have like genre information or anything like that. But
yeah, or at least not yet. That's the question: is do you want to add tags to it or not, and or send tags?
It has tags now. It doesn't have like. I don't think I link them up. Like, you can't find other people who use the same tag. I could do that pretty easily.
Because in some sense, just by using micropub and the way you're storing and displaying the data, it becomes I mean, you're a de facto silo in some sense versus actively syndicating to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a silo in the sense that it's a backup until you can support it yourself. You know, like you don't have micropub, you can use it.
Yeah. Or is it putting out a feed of everything so we can follow the, you know, the fire hose feed?
It does not. Trying to remember why I didn't do that. I definitely thought about it. I think I was just trying to weigh the balance between like is this a social network for books basically or read posts, or is it primarily a micropub client? And so I focused on micropub client because it's simpler, and also just because I didn't have to deal necessarily with the privacy implications then too. You know, like everything you post is public there, but unless people know your domain name, like I don't advertise who the users are, you know, but you could go to /users/example.com to find out if they're using it.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a request to do private posts. So those will need to be like obviously hidden from those streams, and maybe at that point we can do some aggregate streams.
Yeah, the real question is how much do you want to, you know, do you want to be a standalone tool that's kind of simple to maintain versus, you know, either a discovery hub and or a whole separate silo under yourself, which is a whole nother ball of wax.
I'm definitely down for discovery. Obviously, I really don't want to be another silo.
Yeah. Or is there somewhere you can partner up with, like a, you know, a service like a WorldCat that already has all the data, and then it's a question of who's reading what now?
Mm.
We're going to them and saying, hey, I can add this piece to your technology stack and let them maintain it potentially. If you could find a, you know, technologist librarian on their staff who wants to do that. But, well, from your perspective in using it on a regular basis, what things do you miss about Goodreads-esque functionality that you wish you had in it just as a micropub client?
Right now, I'm pretty pleased with it in that regard, because I think the thing I really like the most is just keeping lists of books that I want to read so I don't forget about them. And I'm still, like, I'm just manually posseing things to Goodreads because I don't add stuff that frequently, maybe like a few a week, you know, and sometimes there's weeks where I don't add anything. So the friction of that hasn't really gotten me yet. I do like the keeping track of progress. And I do read. I read either on the Nook or on regular papers. So I don't have any of the electronic integration. You know, like my Nook is offline. I don't send information anywhere. And I don't think, honestly, it's an older Nook, so I don't think it would integrate with Goodreads anyway.
Yeah. But, I was going to say, you have a Nook and it still works?
Yeah. Yeah, progress would be cool. I'm not really prepared, like on the site. I don't know how to really track that, so I still use Goodreads for that. And that's like, I'm not too concerned about losing that data. It's just kind of a neat. It inspired me in the moment, you know, to keep reading. You know,
yeah.
I just like like, oh, I'm at 50% now. So
I would, you'd almost have to make it a slider where you just have to guesstimate versus like, because if you try to manually add it, you're never gonna. I was watching as a teacher who's tried to watch like kids log like their reading logs forever, like number of minutes or number of pages. It's like the more manual it is, it just takes the joy out of reading. Maybe like a little slider where it's just like you're kind of guessing, or you enter the pages ahead of time, and you get a little slider like if it knows the pages, and you can just kind of indicate like as you move. I don't know, or you just type in a number. That always works.
Yeah, that's what I do in Goodreads. Goodreads UI is pretty easy.
I haven't checked it out in a while.
I like it's not like the best UI, but it's definitely easy and it's improved, I think. And I like that you can enter either numbers or a percentage.
I think the tough part about the progress stuff is having a way to know which edition you've got, how many pages it may or may not have, or is it an ebook and it doesn't have pages? And is it just then a raw percentage? And that's the toughest part.
And that's
that's one thing that like I'm pretty specific, like, just because I like my data to be correct, so like I'm really specific about that with the Goodreads. Like I'll add a book. Well, nowadays, now that I'm using Indie Book Club, I usually get the correct ISBN right away. But sometimes I'll just go to Goodreads and add a book, and then when I check it out later, I make sure that like it lists the edition that I have. And I am actually a Goodreads librarian, so technically I can go in and make edits if I need to correct stuff. But it's pretty good. But yeah, I'm sure most people don't do that. They just do a search by name and they add whatever the first one is that comes up.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Goodreads librarian because I'm anal like that. So I can go in and more often than not, I'll, if my edition is missing, I'll go in and add it so that I can have it and put in the correct, cover artwork and the whole 9 yards. Nice. Which is, kind of sad and silly, but. And at one point, a couple of years ago, I was one of their most prolific librarian correctors, or was in the top 10 every week for months and months. I haven't done as much of it lately. The other thing too is I had it connected to Calibre for a while, and I could sync data from my desktop on Calibre across to Goodreads. And there was a way I had that would force those things to be fixed metadata wise. And so I was able to, in a given week, I could fix 200 or 300 records at a time.
Oh, wow.
And it's been a couple of years since I've done that. So I've fallen way off the list.
Did Calibre stop working or?
No, I've got it on a work machine that I don't have at home as often. So I don't spend the time I was as a hobbyist fixing those things because it's a work machine at work rather than one at home. So
yeah. It looks like the API that David suggested was through openlibrary.org for adding book information, metadata, and book covers.
Ooh, I didn't know you had the DOI because I read so many PDFs.
Jack Jameson actually prompted me for that. So.
Oh, that's sweet. Like that was like kind of my biggest that's what I was doing because that's mainly what I read. That's really cool. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, try it out. Let me know if it works.
I definitely will. Well,
it could definitely
probably
work.
something broken on mine more than it is on yours.
Let me know if it works well, I guess, with Known or wherever your target is.
I will try.
So yeah, for Pesos, it sounds like. So Chris, you were saying that you think it'd be cool to have it as Bridgie sending web mentions.
Well, that's probably the easiest way to push it out to the most number of people, I would think.
Yeah, although
and
it relies on them. It relies on them being able to parse the microformats, right?
Yeah, or having, if it's like a WordPress site, having the proper markup for it, which has always been a problem for using Bridgie to publish to Twitter, let's say. So it's, and that's kind of always been an issue of how do we do it and syndicate quickly and easily. But then not using that means you have to come up with a solution per platform or per CMS, or you get a whole bunch of people building a whole bunch of plugins to do essentially the same thing. Whereas if you can use something like silo.pub or Bridgie as a means of managing the API side and then just accepting posts by web mention to syndicate out. And what that does too is it kind of nudges people into posting on their own site first, either directly or using micropub, and then moving in the right direction or the kind of preferred direction of Pesos rather than, or Posse instead of Pesos. I mean, so at least you've got the data moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's fairly easy to set up an if this then that recipe and have stuff come out of Goodreads and come back to you, unless you were doing something like an own your Goodreads type of solution, which is another option as well. It's obviously, I think that solution works better for things like own your gram, where there really isn't a post API at all. Or maybe a hybrid solution of both, so that you can choose which way you want to go regardless of what your setup is. But has anybody suggested, MF2 setup for things like pages or percentage of a book? So that if
I've
you're
experimented with it years ago, and I think actually I'm pretty. So it's on the wiki, it's on the read page, but I think it's wrong. Like I stopped doing it. I think at the time, I understand microformats better now, and at the time I was just like making up properties, like this p total or whatever, but there was no consumers or anything, and sorry, brain fart.
Well, and read posts are kind of on the fringe, but the nice part is too, the majority of people who are doing read posts are doing it with post kinds, I think, or the majority who are using that as a method more than anything else. So that's 500 or 600 people right there. And then all the rest who are doing anything read related are using, your tool, which covers, the rest of the group. So between those two services, it's the standard you come up with that becomes the standard that more likely that everybody else is going to end up using. But I don't know if is there anything that Amazon and or Goodreads or any of the other, like, A Libris or any of the other big stores are using in terms of general markup for books?
That's a good question. I should probably document that more. I am definitely, so like, even at the markup or the microformats that we're using now, I'm already thinking about like, how do I minimize that? So for example, I made up P read status for the to read, reading, and finished reading, but I'm thinking that can actually probably be a category, so we can reuse P category. So what I would probably do for that is I would set up like a I would version the Indie Book Club API. So like you go into your settings and say use version 2 of the micropub request, and it'll send through category instead of p-read status. And part of the idea with using p category is that that could also be used for other posts like listen and watch.
Yeah.
So yeah, one thing, if I were to do an own your reads, or if you did own your reads, one thing I'd have to change, which I feel a little nervous about, is so right now when people log in Indie Book Club, your access token is only like stored in your browser session. I don't store it in the database or anything. Because I don't need to do anything asynchronously. Just when you actually fill out the form, then we post it to your site. So if we're to do an own your reads, people would have to log in, and then we'd have to store their access token, pull the API or whatever, however often, and then send posts. So I'm just a little concerned about storing all that.
Yeah.
Everyone's access tokens.
And I don't know how. Well, I've never even thought of it either from the perspective of how Aaron does it. Although my guess is
sure it's just in the database. I mean, maybe he hashes them or encrypts them somehow. But yeah, it is in the database.
Although he's open sourced that too, right? So
yes.
Ideally, you could take what he's got and just kind of remodify it for Goodreads use. Mm-hmm. And the one nice benefit of doing that and then sending it as a micropub request is you don't have to do the scraping, because you have an API to pull that data in. But the nice part is their mobile setup, their mobile app actually is pretty reasonably easy to use for doing quick updates and for typing in, small little status things. And that's the other nice benefit of Own Your Gram and Own Your Swarm, is that you can really leverage what would otherwise be a stupidly complicated UI setup and use that as a means of just moving the data across. So, I don't, from a speed perspective, Pesos isn't as good as Posse technically in terms of where the data is and where it lives first. But if you wanted to build something and have it cover the largest percentage of people out there who would potentially use it, that may be the quickest, easiest setup. And if you wanted to try and use it as a method for taking hundreds of thousands of book bloggers, who a lot of whom are on WordPress, and then there's a bunch, I think, still on Blogger, and one or two other kind of common platforms. Maybe Tumblr is third in line, I think, just based on book bloggers that I follow and pay attention to. You could take a lot of those people very quickly and turn them into indie web capable people, and get a big swath of users to kind of start thinking about, hey, why am I doing what I'm doing and how am I doing it, and why don't, and instead of trying to put so much effort into giving data to Goodreads, I really should just be doing this on my own website. And then that becomes a Band-Aid that everybody can use until better tools are available for doing just a pure indie web solution, rather than worrying about how Goodreads wants to do it. Or Amazon, as we should be calling them. But the tough part is it's, even thinking about that is beyond my pay grade for coding skill. So And my guess is that Aaron Parecki is not going to get around to it for a bit because it's, you know, it's interesting, but I don't think he uses it or would use it as heavily. So, or even building an integration into Bridgie to syndicate that way.
Yeah, I'm very novice at Python, so unfortunately I would not be able to easily extend Bridgie.
I mean, for me, the one thing that I wish I had was more of some kind of progress, either percentage or page indicator, is like the one kind of missing piece of data that I wish I had on a more regular basis.
Mm.
But the tough part is
you're doing that in Goodreads.
So it's Goodreads does it, and so typically I'm going back and adding that data in manually, you know, or I'll scribble it down and then move it over to my site later as I update along the way. Or I have as more of the backstop, I'm using RSS feeds out of Goodreads to save and collect that data. And then maybe once a month, I'll go through all those posts and kind of publish them after the fact.
And I'm poking around the API to see. So there is a read status. So I wonder if
And is that a progress thing, or is that I want to read this, I did read it? Because it's only been recently that I actually noticed on their mobile app that they have exclusive bookshelves. They seem to treat kind of the way WordPress does categories, and they are exclusive. So right. If you have something that either want to read, something that is read, and those are exclusive, you can't have it in both columns. And then all the rest they treat as tags or kind of a folksonomy, so to speak, which I thought was kind of interesting because I hadn't noticed that they'd done that, at least on it's not as obvious on the desktop, which is what I tend to use more often, but I was looking at the mobile app lately and noticed that they had that kind of differentiation, and all the other non-exclusive shelves are now kind of looked at or viewed as tags. But my guess is that specification is either I want to read this, I am reading it now, or I read it in the past, rather than I'm on page 57.
Well, I don't know. At least based on their user interface, this API documentation is not terribly in depth. But based on the user interface, you go to update your progress. Each one of those is referred to as a status. Although I think a status could also just be a comment, not necessarily a progress. But I think you could basically pull all of a user's statuses and go through each one, and then pull out the information you want. So if you wanted just progress, you would go through them and just pull that out.
Yeah.
But I'm actually gonna sign up for their API so I can actually poke around more and find out.
And if you notice notes or highlights in their API, I mean, it's been around long enough now. They may have it built in as an accessible thing, because that would be a nice chunk of data to have. The tougher part becomes how do you want to display that on your own website or not?
Sure. Yeah. Although, so if we're sending micropub requests still, I mean, you could simply just send it as text to start, you know.
Yeah. And the other thing you could do, either together or separately, and maybe following something like, OmniBear, I think, does quotes. But if you've got, and probably more for tablet than anything else, if you're doing it in a web interface, if you can cut and paste a quote and send a quote and post it to your website as a quote, I feel like there's probably a good number of people, at least people that I follow on Goodreads, are posting quotes from stuff they read on a somewhat regular basis. And that could be either in addition to the read post itself or kind of a separate piece altogether. But that could be an interesting functionality for Indie Book Club to have.
Yeah, I do like that. I think it would basically be an H site, so a citation of a book. So it would probably be a different post type. Like you could go to the book. So you post like you're reading it on Indie Book Club. Then you go to that post and click like add a quote, and we can associate it with that book record. Yeah.
Or if you have a quote and then you have a separate field for note, then that essentially is a quote with a note is an annotation, essentially. And quotes really are essentially highlights, but with a different name. Back for a while, I've had separate functionality on my site to post highlights and then to separately post annotations. But they're all essentially quotes with or without notes at the end of the day. So
right.
Why? I think what I did on my site was I quit using highlights and I just called them annotations to make it more specific that it's essentially a quote from something I'm reading right now as a subtle differentiation rather than posting it as a quote with a note on it. But I think that's just my, more academic-y background feeling, whereas, really it's all this, they're all the same thing. The way you really are displaying them and then showing them is roughly the same. So it's not like we're inventing something totally new or different. And the markup and the micro formats are all the same.
Hey, Eddie.
Hey there. I was just listening in.
No
So we covered kind of been scattered because I didn't have a real direction, just some general ideas. Did you have any thoughts about the way you're using read posts or the way you'd like to?
Yeah, so
you're a Kindle reader, correct?
I haven't been using them much at all because I did that experiment I think this time last year, and then I stopped doing that until I can actually build an automated way. And yeah, I think I use Kindle so much. I think my thing is, see, Doug Bill uses Kindle, star rating review at finished reading, gives option to syndicate to Goodreads. So yeah, I think my ideal is to do everything in Kindle, push it to Goodreads, and then have like a own your read service to get my stuff back to my site. Just because, I mean, if there's a really easy interface to be able to do that stuff, but I don't like I would be able to then highlight a section of a book and share it with that quote, kind of like Chris was talking about. And I don't think I would ever sit down and actually manually type in a quote from a book. I don't think Unless, you know, there are some like really impactful books, but I think I would do it very often if it was just like I'm reading my Kindle, highlight, share.
Yeah.
So I think that friction is a big thing for me. Yeah.
So with the Kindle Share, is it only to Goodreads? Is it? Well, I mean, there must be something to Amazon, but is it configurable? Like, can you set up a target for that?
So you can't set up a target. It's Twitter or Goodreads.
Really? There's not even like an Amazon's own thing?
Nope, because Goodreads is owned by Amazon.
Oh,
So,
right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they own all that data now. So they just have you share straight to Goodreads, and then they have it. Yeah.
I wonder if the highlights and stuff show up in the Kindle Cloud Reader.
Yeah, I think they sync them across the last time I looked. Because all the highlighting and annotation stuff was built into Amazon from ages ago. And it's only been in the last year or so that Goodreads has picked up a lot of that stuff and then started sharing data across.
Yeah.
Although it's been a while since I used a Kindle on my Android device, I'm kind of curious if they, because ages ago I was using a thing called URL Forwarder that as a kind of default share client. So you could use the ubiquitous share this from whatever service, and you could share it to that as your target. And then I just made the target for that a webhook on my website that would then accept the data. But it's been a while since I've even used that, because most of the micropub clients out there have replaced doing that.
Yeah, I was using that for replying to tweets on my own site. I had like in the Twitter app, you know, just like share this link or whatever, went to URL Forwarder, my own site.
But I also don't think that Amazon, part of how URL Forwarder works is it takes the URL and forwards that along. And then you can do the parsing on it on your front end to get the stuff you want. So I don't know how URL Forwarder would really help in that case in terms of moving that data across.
That makes sense. That does seem tricky. Yeah, I've looked into all sorts of different things. I even one time looked to see if, unfortunately, Amazon only gives you an API for Goodreads and not for Kindle, because what I really wanted to do was just automatically grab everything that I did on the Kindle highlighting. So I didn't even have to do the like share to Goodreads, but Amazon want all the data for themselves.
So here's the nice thing is on my Android phone in the Amazon app, I can highlight a thing and then click the share button, and it will give me every app that will accept shareable data. So I can email that quote to myself. I can, share it to, presumably I could share it to my WordPress site directly.
What app is that again?
It's just the Amazon book, the Kindle app for Android.
Yeah, so the iOS and Android Kindle apps actually do allow you, like you said, to share information. So I've actually thought about that before, but I find I don't read on my phone very much. Do you read on your phone often, or do you like read on like a Kindle and then
I
tend
to
share it?
I tend to use my physical Kindle to do it, which there's not as many options to do it from there. And essentially, if I share from my Android phone on my Amazon app, it shares the quote and then it says, "I thought of you when I read this quote from the book by the author," and then it has the quote. And then underneath it says, "Start reading this book for free," and it gives you an Amazon, an a.co link so that you could foreseeably quickly buy that book So whoever you're sharing the thing to, whether it's by email or whatever. So obviously, if I shared it directly to my website, I would, want to tweak it.
Yeah,
But at least it moves the quote data over automatically. So that's kind of a plus.
That's true. That's pretty nifty.
And in this case, I probably would save it as a draft and then deal with it later on anyway. Nobody needs my real-time highlights.
That's a good point. Yeah. It's okay to clean it up in between that.
But then I'd have a date and timestamp of when I was reading the thing. I would have the quote of the thing, and I could write my quick little 1 or 2 notes. But, that presumes you're on a tablet or a phone rather than a Kindle device, which is a whole nother ball of wax. And that's where I tend to do most of my reading if I'm reading on an electronic format anyway.
Yeah.
I just realized we're at the hour. So is there another session starting?
Oh yeah.
And we're all in it.
That's right. So I guess I will stop the broadcast of this one, create another session, and then we'll pop over to that
there. And then we'll talk about highlights and bookmarks and other things over there. We'll just continue this conversation.
Well, that's true, because it is commonplace book, which that's part of the thing you would do in a commonplace book.
So we just won't tell anybody else that we're continuing on the conversation.
It's booked all the way down.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you guys in a minute.
All right. See you there.